You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Ed, I have a question for you.
Yes, what's your question?
What color smoke billows from the top of Rate Field the day that Jerry dies? That's what I was contemplating as a new Pope was made and he was a White Sox fan. I just want to know what color the smoke is so I know what to look for, because that's the next big thing. The Pope is a White Sox fan, Ed.
I know we have a White Sox fan in the Vatican.
Here, I want to say it a little bit differently, because I said this to my father yesterday. The Pope is a White Sox fan from Dolton, and that is the weirdest thing I've ever said in my life.
That is, you were never expecting to say something like. I mean, it's hard to fathom an American Pope because it's just. She's the first, right?
The Pope was at the 2005 World Series in a White Sox jacket.
Yes, yeah. The Pope has a picture of him and his family at Aurelio's.
I've seen that. It's amazing.
Which, by the way, you called yesterday amongst a group of us that he's probably been to Aurelio's.
Yeah, I mean, I was laughing hysterically all day. I have a great Pope story because he's a White Sox fan now, so we get to talk about the Pope on Sox in the Basement, okay? In fact, yes. I will forever be referring from this point forward to the White Sox as God's team. This is God's team now, folks. It happened yesterday. It's God's team. There's nowhere to go but up for the Chicago White Sox. Now that the Pope...
So never again will we see Chase Mydroth play a pop-up off of his face?
It was fair, but yes, a pop-off off his face. That will never happen again. It's always darkest before the dawn, my friend. And then suddenly, the Pope is sitting... Right now, I imagine him wearing his White Sox starter jacket and that big hat, just walking around in the Vatican. That's what I figure he did.
He's got a mitre and a Brzezinski jersey on.
The first thing my sister texted was, if this guy doesn't come out with a Sox hat on, I'm going to be disappointed.
You know, the old script, I mean, it will look good on the Pope hats.
It would look good on the Pope. Yeah. Yes. And here's some things. Some things were pointed out to me over the last 24 hours that I just love. The White Sox in the day that the Pope, a White Sox fan, Pope Leo, the day he became Pope, the White Sox were sitting at 10-28. John 10:28 says, I will give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. God's team. God's team, Ed.
That's what this uncanny.
Is. It's amazing.
Uncanny.
The White Sox will live forever, and the Pope is a White Sox fan. God's team. And I want to have him on Sox in the Basement. Now the race is on for all the podcasts and Garfine to try to get the Pope on first. And I feel like I have an inside edge because, amazingly enough, I have a connection to the Pope.
Of course you do. Of course you have a connection to the Pope.
Like the 108 has Brooks Boyer. I've got a loose connection to the Pope. It turns out my parents hung with the Pope last summer, the new Pope. They were in Italy.
Oh, okay.
On a tour with Father Tom McCarthy of St. Rita, who is an Augustinian priest. And my mother and father are very religious, okay? My mom used to make rosaries that they would hand out to people. She would hand make them just to kind of keep herself busy, okay? Mom is very involved in the church, and dad now, ipso facto, has become very involved because, he's next to her. So they go on this trip to Italy, and they go to the Vatican. And what it is a tour of a bunch of different churches. Now, this will tell you that this guy really is a South Side guy. It's so South Side, this encounter and what he does, the new Pope. They go to the Vatican, and the Augustinian priest they're with reaches out, and this guy meets them at the Vatican and brings them into the catacombs where all the popes are buried, which is not like a normal thing.
No, you don't get that on the tour normally.
You don't normally get that on the tour.
That's the basement of the Alamo.
Right. So
there.
right away, Pope in the basement. Okay. And he's giving him like the better tour, right? Oh, you're from Chicago? I'm hooking you up. You're Southsiders? I got you. That's what he's doing. He gives like a special mass down there, right? And then afterwards, he's hanging out with all of them. And he's asking and it's a very small group that my folks are in. They all got to meet him. They're talking to him. He's not the Pope yet, but now he's the Pope. Anyway, he's asking them. They're all from the South Side of Chicago. He's, talking with them and everything like that. And then he's like, where are you going? And they tell him the next 3 towns they're going to and the next 3 churches they're going to. And the plan is you go to these churches, and afterwards you go out to dinner someplace, right? He goes, oh, I'm going to call ahead for you. This is our new Pope. I got you. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. The next 3 days they went to a church. And after they visited the church and had mass, the priest would say, don't leave, would bring them into a room where there was a giant spread of food with free beer, free wine, just a party for 3 days. That's the new Pope. The new Pope was like, Southsiders are in Italy. I'm hooking them up for 3 days of partying with free booze. That's our Pope.
3 days of partying at churches in Italy.
I mean, it's a very Pope thing. But I mean, the Pope likes to knock back a beer, it sounds like.
Okay, well, or at least he doesn't mind if you do.
No, he sounds like a pretty normal guy. Which this is the most amazing thing. This is why I think I'm trapped in a matrix. It just the weirdest stuff is happening over the last couple of years. The Pope is from Dolton, and he's a White Sox fan. This team has to win now. Like in my mind, it has to win now, Ed. Like things have to turn around now for this team, right? Somewhere along the line, it has to happen. Jerry Reinsdorf should be nervous because God is looking at him going, I don't know, I think you've been here long enough. Like that's what's happening today. Somewhere in the ether.
Yeah, Jerry should be looking more at charitable works. He's got millions of poor White Sox fans that he needs to devote some of his considerable wealth to by actually signing some free agents. Yeah, and maybe extending some players.
Maybe spending some money. Like I said, you didn't
exactly. That's what I mean. It's charity for your fans at this point, Jerry.
You weren't
good acts
going to win anything this year, but the idea that you couldn't put a couple of viable baseball players on the team so the guys who were developing around them had a little bit more support. When I see Chase Meidroth take a ball off his face and everybody goes, well, that's the most White Sox thing. Welcome to the culture, kid. It shouldn't be that way. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Like a guy like Chase Meidroth, a guy like Edgar Carroll shouldn't feel in their first season when they come up that it's all on them to score all the runs. But I guarantee that's how they feel right now.
Oh, they're getting there.
Yeah, well, they're it. The majority of your runs that you're scoring is when you run through the portion of the lineup with Meidroth and Robert and Carroll. And they all know that they have to do something when they get up there at the plate because Andrew Vaughn's waiting there to do nothing. Vargas is now contributing, so that's great. But look at it's a very finite amount of guys that can actually go up there and get a hit. It's a finite amount of guys that can actually go out there and play the field crisply and play good baseball. So you put an enormous amount of pressure on these young players who are your future because you're so cheap. You couldn't just get a couple of professional baseball players to put around them, a couple of competent individuals that you wouldn't have had to spend a ton of money to get, but teams all over baseball went out and got. And you were like, no, we're not just going to slash payroll. We're going to light it on fire. And this is the result that you get. And when this build or rebuild or whatever stupid name you want to call it, when this thing is slower than they expected, this is one of the reasons it will be slower. The idea of tearing down completely to the studs and spending nothing for years doesn't really work anymore in Major League Baseball. And then it's so hard to get started again. You know who did that? The Pittsburgh Pirates. You see what they're doing this year? Nothing. You know who did that? The Baltimore Orioles. You see their start this year?
Bad.
These teams have such a hard time leaving that mentality and actually spending money. And if you believe that Jerry Reinsdorf is going to be the guy who's like, no, don't worry about it. I'll sign big names like Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. He didn't, and he won't. I hope that Chris Getz is as frustrated as I am. I hope he's in there begging constantly for money and he's just getting turned down. I really hope he hasn't drank the Kool-Aid of the old man. You know, I hope there's some push somewhere. There's begging, there's pleading. How about another presentation? Remember when he talked about that? Like, we had to sit down and we had to come up with all this stuff. And we had to write it down. We had to use some charts and some graphs and like an overhead projector. We had to get the White Sox AV Club in there. And if you present it all right to Jerry Reinsdorf, you can convince him of what the right thing is to do. This is something you need to convince him of. You can't really do it now, but it's something you definitely have to do this offseason. And you screwed up by not doing it this offseason because the pressure you're putting on the younger players that are coming up. I mean, there's a reason Edgar Carroll is having a bit of a slide. Not a huge slide, but a little bit of them. He had a couple days there. It was just an offer. Chase Meidroth is taking a ball off his face because he's literally trying to figure out, how can I do everything? And he's not that kind of player. And you put all this pressure. I mean, his OPS is, his OBP is still pretty good at 355. He's getting on base at a 355 clip, but he's capable of doing better than 245, I believe. He's capable of contributing better than a 619 OPS. I really think that this kid is an everyday baseball player. But when you're putting that much pressure on these young guys who are still adjusting to the majors, because you can't surround them with a couple of professional baseball players that can take the pressure off. That's why the Andrew Vaughn thing made no sense. What was he providing to you? That you're like, well, we got to bring him back at $6 million. I don't know, maybe spend just a little bit of money and bring in somebody who could have sit in the middle of the order and take that pressure off.
That would be helpful. And then you can worry about signing a superstar when it becomes a put you over the top. And that's what Bryce Harper and Manny Machado were supposed to be, put you over the top. But they weren't signed to that. And you didn't have any real star power with that. And then you settled for guys that were not going to bring the same caliber of talent to your lineup. And that's where they also cannot make the same mistakes of the past, because if Chris Getz does get money, he cannot settle for Dallas Keuchel again. Not that he would settle for the exact player, but that type. The guy that is clearly washed out, but still commands a huge dollar amount.
I mean, I don't know. They do fall in love with players. I mean, look at Mike Clevenger. They just can't quit him. For exterior windows,
thank God they did.
Doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. They are not going to track in mud and bring some dingy example window or a magazine to show you at their house and then pressure you while they're sitting in your living room, just pressure you. They're not that kind of window place. A lot of people are doing that. They don't do that. You go in the showroom, you see everything. There's an owner in there. There's an owner on site when they install with all their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. Now is the time. All major brands, custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Get out to Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest this weekend and let's get the house looking perfect this summer. Half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. And God's team, and I am going to be calling them that forever now.
Yes.
God's team needs a better owner. I think the goal of his brothers, did you see the Pope's brothers on TV? I've seen two of them now.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Those guys have to constantly be calling him up, telling him how bad the White Sox are. That's like their job. Their job is they have to continuously remind, because he's going to get busy, like leading the world's, Catholics and Christians.
Popes don't have a lot of downtime.
Right. It's time consuming, right? They have to remind him of how bad the team is, so he can throw a couple of prayers in there every once in a while. So when he's sitting there and he's going through all the important business of the day with the good Lord, that he adds in, and could we just get some new ownership in Chicago? Can you do me a favor?
Yeah, because anything is better than what we've got. And you just hope that they don't get caught up too much in the whole, Chicago produced a Pope before a 4,000-yard passer and get caught up in getting Caleb Williams some extra reps.
This guy's a Sox
We're okay
fan.
with him.
This guy's a Sox fan. He's only a couple sections over from where I was at in Game 1 of the World Series, from what I could tell in that picture. I was at a baseball game with the Pope. I mean, we were really far away, but a lot of us were at a game with the Pope. Think about that. That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, and again, wasn't the Pope at the time, but
So what my big goal, getting back to that, is to get him. And we need the Pope. We need Pope in the basement. Okay, Sox in the Vatican.
Pope in the basement would be good. Sox in the Vatican.
Sox in the Vatican. Right. Pope at the Cork. We can get him over to Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton, maybe. He's been there. So.
The
Pope has sat on a bar stool at Cork and Carry.
The Pope has been there. The Pope has had one of the award-winning burgers. Yes, absolutely.
The Pope has sat at Cork and Carry at the Park. You got to go now. You got to go. You got to go sit at a bar stool and be like, this may have been the bar stool the Pope was on.
Yeah,
right?
at some point, you could be sitting there where the Pope sat. You could be using the Pope's table.
33rd and Princeton, shadow of the ballpark, the incredible menu, great staff, and the home of Sox in the Basement, Cork and Carry at the Park, proud sponsors, and we appreciate all that they do. And every time I think about this, I just laugh. Like I could have stood next to this guy in the urinals at the ballpark. Now he's the Pope. I saw that picture of him in his starter jacket or whatever. He's wearing his White Sox stuff at the World Series, and I'm like, I probably brushed against him trying to get a beer.
Well, and that's the thing is what's really messing with Chicagoans' minds and White Sox fans' minds about Pope Leo is he's one of us. He's a guy that like you said, from Dolton, White Sox fan, was at the World Series. We were talking about, there's a picture of him out there at Aurelio's. His brother still lives around here. I mean, it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, okay, yeah, you're right. There's so many opportunities that you could have had to have bumped into him. Whereas as we're used to as White Sox fans, two things. One, the Pope being from some other country where it almost becomes, even that much more mysterious about him, right? The mysterious surroundings of the Pope and the grandeur and everything like that. And it feels good to have sort of an everyday regular guy as the Pope. But also, because we're White Sox fans, we do feel as though God has forsaken us for about 20 years now. So, it does open up some possibilities. It really does.
And you know what also is amazing? It's amazing that the Cubs tried to claim him.
Oh, almost immediately.
That was the funniest part about it. And the Cubs claimed him and put him on the marquee. I love that. I love that the Cubs tried to claim him.
Jumping the gun there, guys.
You really need to confirm your sources. Okay, you went a little bit too quick on that one. Put it up on the marquee. That's brilliant. We've got a pretty famous fan base, if you think about it.
That's the weird thing. We've had a president and now a pope.
We did. We had a president, and look, this is not a political statement. We had a president who didn't know very much about the team. That was always the thing that I always thought was really funny.
Right. Yes, that's true.
He would mispronounce player names when he was trying to talk about them. Like, you could tell he hadn't really seen a lot of White Sox games.
But he did wear the hat when he threw out the first pitch at the Nationals game. So
he claimed them, but he had a really hard time explaining anything that was actually happening with the team and didn't know about it. I feel like the Pope, I'm guessing he knows a little bit about the team. He would be an interesting conversation. Like I said, I got a meandering kind of connection, kind of know the priest that knows him. Like, I mean, he's got to be coming to Chicago at some point. This is my goal now. Pope in the basement. Sox in the Vatican, Pope at the Cork. I don't know what we'll call the episode, but that's the goal now. He becomes the number one guest that I want to have on my show now.
Now, do we invite Don Paul back for that?
Well, we have had the Pope Don Paul on. The Sox Nerd.
Yes.
The Sox Nerd was amazing with that one. He had a great post after the Pope was made. This is the second Pope for the White Sox with a picture of Don Paul. Yeah. So I need both White Sox Popes on the show. We've had Don Paul, and now we need Leo. So.
And I mean, I guess you can put in a deacon there too. We could get Warren Newsom.
Listen, back to God's team. The White Sox hate Dominic Fletcher. That seems very apparent.
They really do.
They hate Dominic Fletcher, and I get it. He didn't do very well last year, but he is one of the best hitters down in AAA. And you get the injury to Andrew Benintendi, and you outright one of your pitchers. Who do they outright? They outrighted Penn Murphy. So they had to make room. So that means they're going to select somebody off the 40-man roster. So everybody's available at that point. You don't need to be a 40-man guy. And they go with Nick Maton.
Yeah, speaking of guys who haven't done well at the major league level, Nick Maton.
Right,
welcome
but
back.
They'd rather bring him back than see whether or not Fletcher's figured it out because he's playing well. So I don't know why that is. But when I see stuff like that, I sit there and I think to myself, oh, wow, on one hand, like, I would complain if they brought him up again and he was terrible again. I'd be like, well, you just can't admit your mistake, right? So I mean, it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-sided coin because it does show me that the brain trust in the front office has traded for a player, evaluated that player, and made a decision on that player. And it's not like, well, we traded for him, we have to continue to stick with him, which is kind of the opposite of like some of the other decisions they make where this stubborn, just hold on to Andrew Vaughn type thing when Tim Elko's killing it. Are you going to be cutthroat with everybody or is it just certain guys? Because that was like his first trade or one of his first trades. You would think he'd be almost like married to the guy. Like, well, I gotta prove I was right with it. And here he is. He had an opportunity to bring him up. He's been hitting well down there. He's been playing well down there. You're not going anywhere, right? So why not give him another chance if you had an opportunity to buy the contract of a player that's not on the 40-man? You can always outrate him again if it's not working out. Nobody wants him.
It's not like you're going to lose the guy. I mean, granted, 265 as an average isn't nearly what Tim Elko's doing, but he has a 336 on base percentage. He's getting on base. He's got an 836 OPS, and his defense is really, really good. right? That was the one thing that's only
I actually kind of mixed them up a little bit because when I was sorting, I mean, another guy you could have brought up was Corey Jokes, who's hitting 364 with a 1054. He's the best hitting outfielder down there.
And he's got 13 doubles, which is providing some power.
And that's another guy that you traded for and you sent down. And he's actually kind of on fire. Forget Dominic Fletcher. Obviously, while I was sorting the stats, I hit the wrong button here. And I'm like, oh, he's the highest outfielder. And somehow Corey Jokes wasn't on the list. Now I've refreshed my screen. So I apologize for that. Because I knew there had to be a better option than Nick Maton. And there was plenty of better options down there than Nick Maton.
Well, I mean, Brandon Drury's sitting there too.
Right. Thank you.
And yeah, he's only played in 10 games. And yes, I understand he's hitting 179 with a 601 OPS, but he's also Brandon Drury. Okay. He's a guy, he's coming back off of injury, but he is an established major leaguer. Okay. And if he hadn't hurt his thumb in spring training, he would have been on this roster immediately. And we would not have looked back unless he completely stumbled out of the gates and fell apart again and had, another round of whatever was ailing him in his worst seasons with the Angels. But you have Drury,
Jokes is 364. 364 with a 440 on base percentage, a 1054 OPS, over 88 at bats, 28 games.
And I'm sorry, you could have brought up Tim Elko.
You could have brought up Tim Elko. You could have done that as well. You could have brought up Tim Elko. I mean, you have a DH spot that's sitting there, and sometimes the elevations make no sense to me. Sometimes I don't get them. And then I sit there and I try to justify it, and I go, okay, well, is it because they figure he'll only be up here for a couple of days and we've got another plan that's coming? Like, we're waiting for Brandon Drury to put it together and we feel like he's going to be here in a couple of days. So we're just bringing up a body that's not even going to take the field. It's just going to sit there at the end of the bench that we know we're going to outright in 3 days. Like, maybe that's what the reason is.
Yeah, and I don't know. It could also be, Maton's a left-handed hitter. Maybe you feel like you needed to replace a lefty bat with a lefty bat.
For all the strategy that's involved in being the worst team in baseball?
Exactly. I don't know that makes any, but at that point, bring up Dominic Fletcher.
That's the funny thing. Like, that's what I always go to with this team is like, what are you, right? Like, if you're not going to invest any money, if you're not going to make sure that you have like at least a competent baseball team that surrounds the guys that are coming up, then you're making decisions based upon like strategy and trying to field the best, the team that's going to give the manager more options in game. What does that matter if you're going to lose 80% of the games?
Yeah, having Jacob Amaya on the team for strategic purposes doesn't make sense because other than playing shortstop at a competent, if not slightly above competent level, he brings you nothing to the plate. I mean, there's no reason for him to be on the bench other than for defensive purposes, but you don't really need that because Brooks Baldwin isn't exactly bad. Chase Mydroth isn't exactly bad. It's not like and Josh Rojas is back. And it's not like you're carrying, somebody who's a real defensive liability. You're not starting Bobby Dahlbeck there anymore. You got rid of him. So you don't really understand the strategy of it when Josh Palacios is getting a lot of runs and starts in your lineup, and he's a guy who is a failed prospect. He's essentially what we're saying that they have turned their back on Dominic Fletcher and Corey Jolks for being, a guy that you picked up that was somewhat pedigreed from another organization who had never proved in the majors. I mean, Fletcher had actually had a good run with the Diamondbacks at least, but hadn't had the success in the majors, and Palacios is proving everybody right that this is what he is because he, again, is not playing particularly well. And you could sit there and say, Josh Palacios is waiting for Mike Tauchman to come back. Okay, that makes sense. But there's no reason when Benintendi goes down, if you're sitting there with Taylor, Palacios, Luis Robert Jr., and Brooks Baldwin, who's basically an outfielder at this point, you have 4 outfielders. Maton does not need to play in the field. He's been primarily a DH for you this season. Why is Tim Elko not up here seeing if he can translate his success into the DH role? Why is Corey Jolks not up here seeing if maybe he has changed something and figured something out somewhat late in his career here because he's approaching 30? Why are you just not bringing up Brandon Drury and saying, ready or not, here you come, you're back in the bigs? Because one of the things that might be going wrong with Brandon Drury is he doesn't want to be in AAA. He's just biding his time, and he wants an opportunity to play and show that he's the guy who hit 30 home runs for the Angels a couple years ago.
And had the really great spring.
That was cast off. Yeah, and had the guy who had the really great spring.
music can mean only one thing. The Sox nerd, Dave Marin, on the line, and he's going to give us some trivia and tidbits and nuggets just like he does each and every Sox home game at Rate Field, and he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventures? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Check out the brand new Lamont Unlocked podcast. Yours truly, one of the two on that. I get a facial this week. The episode that's currently out, like there's red goo all over my face. Just for that on video, you should get to lamontdowntown.com and see everything they have going on, or go direct to the podcast at lamontdowntown.com/unlocked. See it all right there. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, last week I talked of parts or segments of the 2025 White Sox that were positive. This week, let's talk about a whole or a complete positive, and that's Shane Smith. The right-handed starter is on track to be the best White Sox Rule 5 pick ever. Smith has posted a 2.45 ERA, which is the lowest by any White Sox starter in his first 7 big league appearances. Next on the list is Drew Thorpe at 3.03 last year. The list of Sox pitchers who have made 7 starts in their first 7 MLB appearances ain't great, but it does include Jack McDowell, Greg Hibbard, Alex Fernandez, and Dylan Cease. Of any pitcher who has made any starts within his first 7 MLB games, the only Sox with lower ERAs than Smith are Matt Foster at 0.00 and Jose Quintana at 1.53. Foster made 2 starts within his first 7 games in 2020, while Quintana made 5 in 2012. It's obvious it's tough to get a good swing against Smith. Through 7 starts, his 1.15 whip was second lowest among qualified rookies, and he allowed just 1 home run. The 1 gopher ball was the fewest among any Sox starter in his first 37 1/3 big league innings, and 1 more. Smith earned his first big league win on April 24th. He became the first Smith to notch a win for the Sox since July 5th, 1947, when Eddie Smith bested Cleveland at Comiskey Park on the day Larry Doby integrated the American League. You think that's nuts? Wait till Brooks Baldwin gets a triple. I know I'm too excited about Smith, and I know there's the second time around the league factor at work here, but for now, I am enjoying Shane Smith. On an unrelated note, I'm a little obsessed with White Sox birthdays, a topic I have touched on in this space from time to time. I'm beginning to rethink that. Matt Thaiss started for the Sox on his 30th birthday on Tuesday. That loss marked the 19th in a row for the Sox with a birthday boy in the starting lineup. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger, in honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. Jeff Blum was in town with the Astros last week. What a gem. Did you know that Blummer is one of 4 players with a homer in his only World Series plate appearance? The others are the Yankees' Jim Mason in 1976, Boston's Bobby Kilty in 2007, and Washington's Michael A. Taylor, yes, our Michael A. Taylor, in 2019. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about Shane Smith, Matt Foster, Larry Doby, and Matty Thaiss. Oh, and welcome home, Nancy.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.